Today's conversation is one that affects millions of older adults, often quietly, often without warning, until something suddenly changes their life. Weak bones. And what surprised me, doctor, is that you said most seniors don't lose bone because of aging. They lose it because of inactivity, poor posture, and fear of movement. Is that really true? Greater than yes, David. And I want every viewer to hear this. Most bone loss is not caused by age alone. It is caused by the signals we send to the body. If the body is not told to maintain the skeleton, it simply stops maintaining it. Our bones respond to pressure, motion, and alignment. The tiny forces that come from standing tall, walking correctly, and using the spine as it was designed to be used. So, you're saying that when people sit more, bend forward more, or stop using their body's strength, the skeleton interprets that as I'm no longer needed. Greater than exactly. Bones are living tissue. They listen, they adapt, and when the message is less use, they become thinner, weaker, and more fragile. But here is the part one want to emphasize, David, and it will be deeply reassuring to our viewers. Even after 60, even after 70, bones can still rebuild. All they need is the right kind of stimulus. And it does not require heavy weights, long workouts, or painful routines. In fact, it can start with 5 minutes a day using the wall in your home and the spine you already have. Greater than this is what amazed me when we first discussed this episode. That rebuilding bone, something many seniors think requires medications or long exercise classes, can begin with posture, breath, and gentle pressure. So, in today's episode, we'll explore how bones actually rebuild, why fear and poor posture accelerate bone loss, the simplest daily movements to stimulate bone strength, how to stand, breathe, and align the body to protect the spine, and why 5 minutes a day can change everything. Doctor, let's begin with the foundation. To understand bone loss, we must understand a simple biological rule. Bones remodel according to the forces placed upon them. If the forces are strong, bones grow. If the forces are weak, bones fade. This process never stops. Not at 40, not at 60, not even at 90. Here is what happens inside the body. Every day, small cells called osteoclasts remove old bone tissue. At the same time, osteoblasts build new bone. But as we grow older, two things shift. We move less. We compress the spine with poor posture. This sends a dangerous message. We don't need strong bone here anymore. Osteoclasts begin removing more bone than osteoblasts replace. This is how bone loss accelerates. Greater than so bone weakness is not a failure of the body. It's a miscommunication. Greater than precisely. Bones are always listening. If you sit heavily, collapse the chest and round the back, the spine receives almost no positive force. But when you align the spine, lengthen it, and gently press through the legs or arms, even against a wall, the body receives a different message. Strength is needed here. Build. And it builds. This is why simple daily posture habits are far more powerful than most people realize. Greater than doctor, one thing you told me off camera truly surprised me. You said the number one posture habit that accelerates bone loss is something almost every senior does without realizing it. Not because they're weak, but because it feels comfortable. You called it the quiet collapse. Can you explain what that is? Greater than yes, David. The quiet collapse is the slow rounding forward of the upper back and shoulders. Something that happens gradually with age, especially in people who sit often or who feel uncertain on their feet. It feels harmless. It even feels relaxing. But to the skeleton, this posture signals we are no longer using the upper spine. Reduce bone. Here, when the chest collapses and the head shifts forward, the spine loses its natural curves. The shoulder girdle sinks, the ribs compress the lungs, the muscles supporting the spine shut down, and the vertebrae experience the wrong kind of pressure. This is the posture that silently accelerates spinal bone loss. Greater than so, the danger isn't just falling or lack of exercise. It's how we position ourselves all day long. Greater than exactly. Bone responds to alignment plus force. When the spine collapses forward, the force on the bones becomes compressive, not supportive. This leads to vertebral thinning, shrinking height, kyphosis, the Dowger's hump, neck strain, loss of balance. Most importantly, This posture reduces bone building signals by up to 70%. But here is the good news. The spine responds quickly when we reverse this habit, even with very gentle daily corrections. Greater than doctor, before we continue, could you summarize the key idea seniors must take from this? Greater than yes, David. If you lift the chest, lengthen the spine, and bring the head back over the shoulders, even for a few seconds at a time, you begin sending the message, strengthen this area. Build bone here. Posture is not cosmetic. It is biology. Greater than that is empowering, doctor. Most people think they need heavy exercise or medication to support their bones. But you're telling us it starts with how we stand and breathe. Let's help our viewers understand the biological process behind this, how bones actually rebuild, and why even after 60, the body can still respond. Doctor, one of the most encouraging things you ever told me is this. Even after 60, even after 70 or 80, the bones still listen. They still respond. They still have the ability to rebuild. But many seniors believe once bone is lost, it's gone forever. Can you help us understand what's really happening inside the body? Greater than of course, David. And I want every viewer to hear this clearly. Bone is alive. It is not a fixed structure. It is constantly renewing itself. Every day, every year for your entire life. Inside every bone, there is a quiet conversation happening between two types of cells. Osteoclasts, the cells that remove old damaged bone. Osteoblasts, the cells that build new bone. Both are essential. You cannot build new bone unless the old bone is removed first. But here is where aging changes the balance. After 50 or 60, osteoclasts often begin working faster than osteoblasts. This means bone is removed more quickly than it is rebuilt. But and this is the key, osteoblasts do not stop working. They simply become more selective. They build only when the body gives them a strong, clear signal. We need stronger bone right here. Greater than and what creates that signal? Is it exercise, posture, movement? Greater than all of those and more. Osteoblasts respond to gentle pressure, alignment, impact, even very mild impact, muscle tension, direction of force. This is why even simple actions, standing tall, pressing into the ground, aligning the spine, doing a wall exercise send powerful messages to the bone-building system. When the body feels stability, length, strength, and upright posture, osteoblasts begin to rebuild. When the body feels collapse, inactivity, shallow breathing, or lack of force, osteoblasts go quiet. This is why many seniors lose bone quickly when they stop moving after an injury or begin sitting for long periods. It is not age, it is lack of stimulus. Greater than doctor, you once told me something I'll never forget. Bones don't age the way we think. They adapt. Greater than yes. Bone weakness is not the body giving up. It is the body adapting to reduce demand. This means something incredibly hopeful. If you increase the demand, even gently, bones will adapt again. They thicken, they strengthen, they reinforce themselves. This is why research shows seniors in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s can gain bone density with the right movements. Greater than that is extraordinary, doctor, and I know it gives our viewers something even more important than information. It gives them hope. Could you leave us with one simple thought to carry forward? Greater than yes, David. Think of bone not as concrete but as clay. It shapes itself according to your daily habits. Every gentle press of the foot, every lift of the chest, every lengthening of the spine. Those are instructions to the bones. Rebuild me. Greater than beautifully said, doctor. And now that we understand how bone remodeling works, let's move into something many seniors struggle with. The fear of movement. Why fear itself accelerates bone loss and how to break that cycle safely and confidently. Doctor, something I hear from our viewers all the time is this. I'm afraid to move because I don't want to fall. And I understand that fear once someone experiences a fall or even hears stories about one they become cautious. But you've explained that this fear, although natural, can actually accelerate bone loss. Can you help us understand why? Greater than yes, David. And this is something I want every senior to hear with compassion, not judgment. Fear of movement changes the body in very predictable ways. And unfortunately, those changes make bones weaker, not stronger. Here's what happens. When a person is afraid, the first reaction is to shrink inward. The chest tightens. The shoulders come forward. The spine shortens. The breath becomes shallow. The steps become smaller and more tentative. This creates a posture that sends the bones a very specific message. We are not stable. We are not confident. Reduce density. Bone cells respond to confidence. They respond to upright alignment. They respond to movement that says, I can carry my weight. I am safe. When fear takes over, even if the person doesn't realize it, the muscles stop sending strong signals to the bones. They tighten instead of supporting. They brace instead of lifting. They contract without strength. This reduces circulation, reduces oxygen flow, and reduces the mechanical stimulus that bones need to stay dense. Greater than so fear isn't just an emotion. It's a physical posture. Greater than exactly. And posture has a direct effect on bone remodeling. A fearful posture literally turns off the osteoblasts, the bone-building cells. Why? Because the body prioritizes survival, not growth. Fear tells the body, stay small, stay still, don't take risks. But bones require the opposite. Stand tall, move with purpose, engage your muscles. This is why people who become sedentary after a fall often lose bone faster in the months that follow. Not because of the fall itself, but because of the fear that settles in afterward. Greater than doctor, I think many viewers will recognize themselves in what you're describing. What would you say to someone who wants to move but feels too afraid to start? Greater than I would say this. You do not have to be brave all at once. You only need to be brave for a few seconds each day. Start with something so small, so gentle that it does not trigger fear. Standing with your spine tall, pressing your feet into the floor. Placing your hands on a wall for stability. Taking a slow steady breath, shifting your weight from one foot to the other. These micro movements begin to retrain the body. They build confidence, which builds posture, which builds bone. And in time, something remarkable happens. Confidence returns before strength does. And that confidence becomes the foundation for rebuilding your skeletal health. Greater than thank you, doctor. This is such an important message for our viewers that fear is understandable, but it's not the end of their story. Small, safe daily movements can open the door to strength again. And now we're going to get practical. We'll walk you through a simple daily routine, just 5 minutes, that helps the spine lengthen, the hips stabilize, and the bones receive the signals they need to rebuild. Doctor, you've shared something many people have never heard before, that bones respond to gentle signals, alignment, and confidence. I know our listeners are wondering right now, what can I do today? Something simple, something I won't be afraid of. You've mentioned a 5-minute routine before, something anyone can do, even if they're afraid to move. Could you walk us through that? Greater than of course, David, and I want everyone listening to know this. The purpose of these 5 minutes is not to work out. It is to wake up the bones, the muscles, and the nervous system. Think of this as pressing a reset button inside the body. For the first minute, simply stand with your back lightly touching a wall. Not leaning, just touching. Feel the back of the head, the shoulders, and the hips make gentle contact. Breathe slowly. This teaches the spine to lengthen and reminds the body what upright posture feels like. When the spine lengthens, the deep postural muscles engage. And that engagement sends an immediate signal to the bones. We are carrying our weight. Next, slide your hands down the wall as if you were smoothing its surface. This activates the shoulder girdle, which plays a major role in spinal stability. People don't realize how much the ribs and upper back contribute to bone density, especially the vertebrae. Then shift your weight from one foot to the other very slowly. Just a gentle sway. This wakes up the hips and pelvis. The hip bones respond dramatically to even small changes in weight bearing. It's one of the easiest ways to encourage remodeling. Finally, lift your chest just a little. Not a dramatic movement, just enough to free the diaphragm. When breathing becomes deeper, the ribs expand more fully. The ribs are bones, too. And this expansion is a subtle form of internal weight bearing. These are small motions, but they create a cascade. Muscles activate joints, align nerves. Calm circulation improves, bones begin receiving stronger signals. It's not about intensity, it's about clarity. Clear signals create stronger bones. Greater than what strikes me, doctor, is how gentle this is. You're not asking anyone to start lifting heavy weights or doing something that feels intimidating. You're teaching them how to reconnect with their bodies. Almost like waking up a part of themselves they forgot they had. And I can imagine many of our listeners thinking, I can do that. I can stand at a wall. I can breathe. I can shift my weight. That alone makes this routine so empowering. And now how everyday habits, even the way we sit or rise from a chair, can either strengthen bones or quietly weaken them. Doctor, one thing you've taught me, and it surprised me more than almost anything, is that bone loss isn't shaped only by big exercises or medications. It's shaped by the tiny habits we repeat all day long. How we sit, how we breathe, how we stand up from a chair. Most of us never think about these things, yet they quietly influence our bones every single day. Can you help our listeners understand just how powerful these subtle daily movements are? Greater than gladly, David, and you're absolutely right. The small motions, the subconscious habits often tell the fullest story of a person's bone health. Let's begin with sitting because most seniors spend more hours sitting than they realize. When someone sits with a rounded back, shoulders forward, and the chest collapsed, the spine experiences very uneven pressure. Instead of distributing weight evenly, the vertebrae compress in the front. Over time, this contributes to the very thing people fear most, the slow forward rounding of the upper back. But when someone sits tall, not stiff, simply aligned, the spine distributes pressure evenly, the lungs expand, the core muscles awaken, and the bones receive healthier mechanical signals. The body is always listening. Even the act of standing up from a chair carries enormous importance. Most people push through their knees, collapse forward, and strain the lower back. But when you press your feet into the floor, hinge gently at the hips and let the spine remain long, the body performs a coordinated lift. The glutes engage, the thighs stabilize, the hips support the movement. And those areas, hips, thighs, pelvis, are exactly where bone density loss is most dangerous. These are not small details. They're daily opportunities. It sounds like every transition, every time we rise, sit, lean, or shift, is a moment when the body either reinforces bone strength or quietly erodes it. Greater than exactly. Most people believe bone loss is something that happens in the background. But in reality, bone cells respond to the sum of your daily signals. If you stand tall, even for a few seconds, the bones receive a message of confidence. If you walk with intention, not far, not fast, just with gentle purpose, the hips and spine respond. If you breathe deeply, the ribs move more, and rib mobility directly influences bone remodeling. Let me give you an example. I once treated a woman in her late 70s who had developed fear around walking. She was not ready for an exercise program and she didn't trust her balance. So we began with only one habit. Every time she stood up, she was to press into the floor and lengthen her spine. Within 6 weeks, her posture changed. Within 12, her balance improved. Her bone scan the next year showed measurable improvement. Not because of strenuous workouts, but because she changed the quality of the signals her bones received 20 times a day. This is the part people forget. You don't need long workouts to influence your bones. You only need repeated moments of alignment. Greater than doctor, what I love about your approach is that it gives people power again. Most seniors feel bone loss is something happening to them. You're teaching them that their bones respond to habits they can control, not with force, but with awareness. And awareness is something everyone listening can begin using today. And now into another area where people unknowingly weaken their bones. The way they breathe, the way they carry tension, and how stress subtly reshapes the entire skeletal system. Doctor, something I've noticed over the years is that many seniors don't just carry physical strain. They carry emotional tension, worry, loneliness, stress, even simply feeling rushed. And I know you've spoken many times about how these emotional patterns aren't just in the mind. They reshape the body, they influence breathing, and eventually they affect the bones. Can you help our listeners understand how something as invisible as stress can have such a physical impact? Greater than yes, David, and it's one of the most overlooked aspects of bone health. Stress changes posture, posture changes movement, movement changes bone signals. It's a cascade and it happens far more quickly than people realize. When a person is anxious or overwhelmed, the first muscles to tighten are in the neck, shoulders, jaw, and lower back. This tension pulls the body inward. The chest sinks. The diaphragm stiffens. Breathing becomes shallow. A shallow breath limits movement of the rib cage. And those ribs are living bones that respond to expansion. If the ribs stop moving fully, they send fewer signals to the osteoblasts. The body interprets this as reduced demand and bone density declines. But stress also affects hormones. One hormone in particular, cortisol, becomes elevated when the nervous system is overwhelmed. A little cortisol is useful. It helps us manage danger. But chronic elevation slowly erodes bone density by interfering with calcium absorption and the bone-building process. And then there is the emotional posture of stress, the leaning forward, the guarded chest, the protective stance. These shapes teach the bones that the world is unsafe and the body responds by becoming rigid instead of strong. Greater than doctor. When you describe it this way, it becomes so clear why many seniors feel their bones age when what's really happening is that their stress is shaping their body. How does breathing fit into this picture? Greater than breathing is one of the most powerful tools for bone health, more powerful than most people realize. Every deep breath expands the rib cage. This expansion moves the thoracic spine, stretches the intercostal muscles, and sends a subtle mechanical signal into the vertebrae. These signals activate the postural muscles, and strong postural muscles are essential for maintaining bone integrity. Shallow breathing, on the other hand, creates stiffness. Stiffness creates immobility. Immobility leads to decreased bone stimulation. I once worked with a retired teacher who suffered from osteoporosis and chronic neck pain. She believed she had a structural problem, something unfixable. But when we examined her breathing, we discovered she was barely using the lower half of her lungs. Within weeks of practicing gentle rib expansion breathing, her posture changed, her neck relaxed, her pain reduced, and she began moving more freely, which further strengthened her bones. She told me, "I thought I needed heavier exercise, but what I needed was air." Greater than that's powerful, doctor. And I think many people listening are beginning to realize that bone health isn't just about calcium or medications. It's a full body conversation. The way we breathe, the way we react to stress, the way we carry tension, these are all signals the bones listen to. And what I love about this message is that it gives people something they can do right now in this very moment. A single deep breath, a softening of the shoulders, a lengthening of the spine, small choices that influence the body in profound ways. Let's talk about the daily movements people think are safe but actually weaken their bones over time. Doctor, earlier you spoke about how small positive habits strengthen the bones, which makes me wonder about the opposite. So many of us have everyday habits, things we've done for decades that we never question. Bending forward a certain way, carrying groceries on one side, slouching into a soft couch, twisting when we lift something. Most people assume these motions are harmless, but I know from our conversations off camera that some of these habits slowly weaken the very structures seniors are trying to protect. Could you explain what these silent bone weakeners are and why they matter so much? Greater than of course, David, and you're right. Most bone loss does not come from dramatic injuries. It comes from quiet, repetitive motions that gradually reshape the body. Let's begin with one of the most common, bending from the spine instead of the hips. When someone bends forward by rounding the back, especially if they're carrying something or even picking up something light, the vertebrae take the full load. This compresses the front of the spine and places force where individuals with low bone density are most vulnerable. But when you hinge at the hips, keeping the spine long, letting the pelvis move, the load transfers into the powerful muscles of the legs and glutes. This protects the spine and encourages proper bone stress in the hips. Another quiet bone weakener is twisting under load. This happens when someone reaches into the back seat of a car or turns to grab something from the counter while holding an object. Twisting is not inherently dangerous, but twisting while bearing weight strains the vertebrae, especially in those with osteopenia or osteoporosis. There is also the habit of sitting into soft furniture. Couches that sink deeply pull the pelvis into a tucked position. This rounds the lower spine and places the entire upper body in a collapsed posture. Over time, this teaches the spine to hold itself in a weakened shape. Then there is holding objects on one side of the body, a handbag, groceries, even a grandchild. This creates uneven force distribution on the hips and spine. If done repeatedly, the bones adapt to this imbalance, often leading to asymmetry and increased vulnerability on the weaker side. Finally, perhaps the most overlooked habit is using momentum instead of strength. When someone swings themselves out of bed or throws themselves up from a chair, they bypass the very muscles that stabilize their bones. The movement becomes jerky instead of controlled and the bones receive unclear signals. Greater than that makes so much sense. It's the difference between using the body wisely or letting inertia do the work. Greater than exactly. And here is the encouraging part. These patterns are not permanent. Even at 70, 80, or 90 years old, the body can learn new, safer habits, often within weeks. You simply begin by noticing. Notice how you bend. Notice how you rise from a chair. Notice how you hold objects. Awareness leads to intention, and intention leads to strength. I worked with a gentleman in his early 80s who believed he needed new exercises to fix his back pain. But what he truly needed was better everyday mechanics. Once he learned to hinge at the hips, stand from a chair with his feet grounded, and avoid twisting with weight, his pain decreased, and his confidence grew. He told me, "I didn't change my life, doctor. I changed the way I lived my life." Greater than there's so much wisdom in that. Small changes in the way we move can protect our bones far more than people realize. And what I love about your approach, doctor, is that you're not asking anyone to overhaul their lives, just to bring awareness to the motions they already make every day. When you're ready, let's continue by exploring one of my favorite parts of your teaching. Why certain very gentle forms of pressure and balance work better for seniors than heavy exercise and how they create remarkable improvements in bone strength. Doctor, something you've said many times, both on camera and off, is that after 60, the body responds better to precision than force. Most seniors believe they need heavy weights or intense workouts to build stronger bones, but you've shown me and so many of our listeners that the opposite is often true. Why is it that gentle, deliberate pressure can be more effective and safer than heavy strength training for older adults? Greater than that's a very important question, David. And I want to begin by saying this clearly. Bones respond to meaningful signals, not to excessive force. When someone is younger, heavy exercise can stimulate strong bone remodeling because the muscles and joints recover quickly, balance is stable, and the nervous system is resilient. But after 60, the equation changes. The body begins to value stability over intensity, alignment over speed, and consistency over force. Gentle controlled pressure does something remarkable. It activates the deep stabilizing muscles, the ones closest to the bones, the ones responsible for balance, posture, and structural support. These muscles send the clearest signals to osteoblasts, the cells that build bone. Heavy exercise, on the other hand, often activates the large superficial muscles, powerful but less precise. These can create force, without stability, and if the alignment is off even slightly, that force bypasses the bone-building system and creates strain instead. When movement is gentle and aligned, something different happens. Joints decompress, muscles fire in balanced patterns, nerves stay calm, breathing deepens, posture improves, the body feels safe, and when the body feels safe, the bones respond. Greater than so, it's not about more effort, but better communication inside the body. Greater than exactly. David, let me give you an example. When someone presses lightly into the ground through their feet truly feels the floor, the stabilizing muscles of the legs wake up. This sends a message to the fewer, the hips, and the pelvis. We need support here. A gentle pressure like this activates osteoblasts far more effectively than lifting a heavy dumbbell with poor alignment. Another example is balance work. Standing on one leg for just a few seconds, even with the support of a wall or chair, sends a powerful signal to the bones of the hips and spine. Why? Because balance forces the deep core muscles to engage. And these muscles talk directly to the bone structure. There was a woman I worked with who had severe osteoporosis and was terrified of movement. We didn't lift weights. We didn't do strenuous exercises. All we did were controlled foot presses, gentle hip hinges, and 10 seconds of assisted single-leg balance. Her next bone density scan surprised her doctor. What changed her bones wasn't intensity. It was clarity. Greater than this is such a relief for so many people listening. Doctor, I know countless seniors who feel intimidated by gyms, machines, or exercise programs. You're giving them permission to start small, and to embrace movements that feel calm instead of threatening. Greater than and to be clear, David, starting small is often the most intelligent path. When you work gently, the nervous system stays relaxed. A relaxed nervous system allows better muscle recruitment, better breathing, better alignment, all essential for bone remodeling. When effort becomes too intense, the nervous system becomes protective. Breath becomes shallow, muscles tighten, posture collapses, and the bones receive mixed unproductive signals. Gentleness is not weakness, it is strategic strength. Greater than that's beautifully said, Doctor, and I think many of our listeners are realizing perhaps for the first time that they don't need heavy equipment or strenuous routines to rebuild their bones. They need awareness. They need alignment. They need small intentional movements that the body understands and trusts. Doctor, earlier you spoke about clarity, how the body responds best to clear signals rather than force. I'd like to shift into an area many people forget when they think about bone health. The quiet hours, the time when we sleep, the time when we wake, even the way we hydrate. These aren't things most people associate with bone strength, but I know you've often said they play a bigger role than anyone realizes. Can you explain how these daily rhythms influence the health of our bones? Greater than absolutely, David. And you're right. People tend to think bones are strengthened only by exercise or supplements, but the body does much of its repairing in the silent spaces, especially during sleep. Let's start with sleep because it is one of the most powerful bone-building tools we have. During deep sleep, two important things happen. The first is hormonal restoration. Growth hormone rises, cortisol falls, and the body enters a state that encourages tissue repair, including the repair of microscopic fractures in bones that occur naturally through daily movement. The second is postural release. When the muscles around the spine relax during sleep, circulation improves, allowing nutrients to flow more freely into the vertebrae. If someone sleeps poorly or sleeps in a curled, protective posture, the rib cage loses mobility, the diaphragm tightens and the spine begins the day already compressed. This is why many seniors say, "I feel stiff in the morning." It is not age, it is the way the body has spent the night. That's fascinating. So, even the way we sleep becomes a long-term bone habit. Greater than exactly. Even something as simple as placing a pillow between the knees while sleeping on the side can help maintain hip alignment, which reduces stress on the lumbar spine. Now, let's talk about hydration. Bones are not dry structures. They contain water, a surprising amount in fact, which helps maintain their flexibility and resilience. When someone is dehydrated, the discs between the vertebrae shrink slightly, leading to stiffness. The muscles tighten to compensate, and that tightness reduces the healthy movement bones depend on. Some seniors drink very little water because they worry about nighttime bathroom trips. But even mild dehydration reduces bone circulation and increases the risk of falls. A glass of water in the morning does more for bone health than most people realize. It wakes the body, it lubricates the spine, it prepares the muscles for the day. Greater than and what about morning habits? You've said before that the first 5 minutes after waking set the tone for the entire day. Greater than that's very true. When we wake, the brain transitions from sleep to awareness, but the body lags behind. The spine is at its stiffest in the morning. If someone jumps out of bed quickly, bends forward or twists suddenly, the spine is not ready. But if you begin the day slowly, sitting first, breathing, letting the spine lengthen, you show the body respect. You reduce tension, you prevent strain, and most importantly, you set the bones up for clarity, not confusion. There's a short practice I often teach. Sit at the edge of the bed. Place your feet on the floor. Take one slow breath. Let your spine grow tall inch by inch. Stand by pressing through your feet, not by swinging forward. This takes less than 10 seconds, but it teaches the bones confidence from the moment you begin your day. Greater than I can imagine many listeners trying that tomorrow morning, sitting for a moment, breathing, and rising with intention instead of momentum. It's such a small shift, yet it carries such deep intelligence. Doctor, everything you're sharing reminds us that we don't strengthen bones through extremes, but through consistency, gentleness, and awareness. And now to another powerful piece of your approach. Why bone strength depends not only on how we move, but also on how connected we feel to our own body. Doctor, everything you've shared so far points to a deeper truth. Bone strength isn't just about mechanics or biology. It's about how connected we feel to our bodies. And I've heard you say before that when someone becomes disconnected, even slightly, the bones stop receiving the signals they need. Can you help our listeners understand what that disconnection looks like and what it means for their bone health? Greater than, of course, David. Disconnection is something many people experience without realizing it. It can happen after an injury, after a fall, after a period of stress, or simply after years of sitting and moving without awareness. The body becomes something a person manages rather than something they inhabit. When that happens, the nervous system becomes protective instead of expressive. The muscles tighten without purpose. Breathing becomes short. Movements become cautious instead of confident. Bones thrive on confident movement, even very gentle confidence. But when someone moves with hesitation, the bones perceive reduced demand and bone building slows. The good news is that reconnection does not require strength or flexibility. It begins with sensation, feeling the feet, the breath, the alignment of the spine. A simple example, when you stand and feel the weight shift evenly across your feet, that awareness activates muscles all the way up the legs into the pelvis and through the spine. This kind of sensory feedback tells your body, I am here. I am present. I can support myself. One woman I worked with in her 70s had such severe osteoporosis that she felt afraid to walk around her own kitchen. Her first practice wasn't exercise. It was simply placing her hands on a countertop, closing her eyes, and feeling the way her feet contacted the floor. Within weeks, her balance improved, her breath deepened, her fear lessened. She began moving with more ease, and that movement, gentle but consistent, helped her regain bone density over time. The body listens not only to force, but to presence. Doctor, that is one of the most hopeful things you teach. That strength begins with awareness. And for so many people listening, that message alone can shift the way they move through their day. Doctor, we've talked a lot about movement, alignment, breathing, all the ways the body communicates with the bones. But there's another part of this conversation our listeners always ask about. Nutrition. And not just calcium, which is what most people think of first, but the full spectrum of nutrients that allow bones to rebuild. What should our audience understand about the foods and nutrients that truly support strong, resilient bones? Greater than that's an important question, David, because bone health is often oversimplified. People hear calcium and assume the story ends there. But bones are living tissue. They require a complex orchestra of minerals, vitamins, proteins, and hormones to rebuild themselves. Let's begin with something many seniors overlook. Protein. Bones are not made only of minerals. Nearly half of bone structure is actually a protein matrix called collagen. Without adequate protein, the minerals have nothing to bind to. This is why seniors who eat too little protein, which is very common, often lose bone density even if they take calcium supplements. Next is vitamin D, which helps the body absorb calcium efficiently. If vitamin D is low, calcium simply passes through the digestive system unused. Most people over 60 have lower vitamin D levels than they realize, often because of reduced time in sunlight. Then we have vitamin K2 found in egg yolks, certain cheeses, natto, and supplements. Vitamin K2 acts as a traffic director. It tells calcium where to go into the bones and keeps it away from the arteries. Without K2, calcium can deposit in places it shouldn't. Another essential nutrient is magnesium. Magnesium helps regulate over 300 processes in the body, including bone mineralization. It keeps calcium in balance and allows muscles to relax, which in turn supports aligned posture and smooth, confident movement. And we cannot forget trace minerals such as boron, zinc, and manganese. These appear in small amounts in the diet, but they play vital roles in bone metabolism. Many seniors are surprised to learn that even dehydration reduces mineral movement through the body. Proper hydration helps deliver nutrients into bone tissue and support the discs between the vertebrae. There's a final point I'd like to make, and it's one people often overlook. Food timing matters. A meal rich in protein earlier in the day helps stabilize blood sugar and maintains muscle support for the spine and hips. This indirectly supports the bones by keeping the entire system stable. Greater than it's incredible how interconnected everything is. Movement, breath, hormones, minerals, even the way we time our meals. And the way you explain it, doctor, makes it feel doable. It's not about chasing dozens of supplements. It's about understanding what the body is truly asking for. Greater than exactly, David. Bones are not machines. They respond to nourishment, rhythm, and presence. When the right nutrients are provided, not in excess, but in balance, the bones regain their natural intelligence. Many seniors think, I'm too old for improvement. But the research says otherwise. Even in the 80s and 90s, people can increase bone density when the body receives the signals and the nutrients it needs. This gives our listeners such hope, doctor. You're reminding them that bone health is not a mystery. It's a conversation between nourishment, movement, awareness, and rest. Doctor, one of the things that makes your teaching so unique is that you never separate the body from the mind or emotions. You've shown again and again that feelings, especially those carried quietly for years, can subtly influence posture, breathing, movement, and ultimately bone health. Can you help our listeners understand how emotional weight becomes physical weight and how lifting that burden begins to strengthen the bones? Yes, David, and this is something many people feel even if they've never put words to it. The body remembers. It remembers stress, loss, fear, responsibility, and even long periods of caregiving or self-neglect. Over time, these emotional experiences sink into the physical form. One of the most common patterns is the protective posture, a slight forward rounding of the shoulders, a gentle collapse of the chest, and narrowing across the upper back. Emotionally, it feels like guarding. Physically, it decreases rib movement, limits oxygen intake, weakens postural muscles, and reduces the signals bones need to stay strong. Another pattern is tightness in the lower back caused by the instinct to hold yourself together. People who feel they must always be strong or responsible often brace their bodies unconsciously. This bracing reduces mobility in the pelvis and spine. And when mobility decreases, bone-building signals decrease as well. Then there's the feeling of not trusting the body, often after a fall or illness. This leads to tentative movement, hesitation, and a shrinking of one's physical presence. The bones interpret this as decreased demand and respond by decreasing density. But here is the hopeful part. The moment a person begins acknowledging these emotional patterns, the body shifts. Awareness is the beginning of release. I once worked with a gentleman who had lost his wife years earlier. He carried his grief in his posture, a rounded upper back, shallow breath, and hesitant steps. When we talked about his emotional experience, something softened. His shoulders opened a little. His breath deepened, movement returned to areas that had been held tight for years. As he reconnected with his emotional landscape, his posture changed, and his bone health improved. This is not magic, it's physiology. Emotional release brings physical expansion. Physical expansion brings better muscle activation and clearer signals to the bones. Greater than that's incredibly powerful, doctor. You're showing people that their emotions aren't separate from their body. They're woven into every movement, every breath. Greater than exactly, David. And none of this means a person must be joyful all the time or free of stress. That is not realistic. What matters is allowing the body to express itself fully. A deep breath, a lifted chest, a steady step. These simple actions begin dissolving years of holding. When tension releases, strength returns. Greater than that gives our listeners permission to be human, doctor, to recognize that their emotional story is part of their physical story and that healing one gently supports healing the other. Doctor, there's one more piece of this conversation that I think deserves attention. Something many seniors overlook when they think about bone health, and that is connection. Not just physical connection to the body, but social connection, the presence of others, the feeling of belonging, having a purpose, being seen. I've heard you say before that isolation is one of the quiet forces that weakens the body. Can you help our listeners understand how community or the lack of it influences bone strength? Greater than yes, David. This is a deeply human part of the healing process. The body thrives when a person feels connected. Connection reduces stress hormones, improves breathing, stabilizes posture, and encourages movement, all essential for maintaining strong bones. When someone is socially isolated, we often see reduced physical activity, increased stiffness, declining confidence in movement, shallow breathing, protective closed posture, higher levels of cortisol. All of these contribute to bone loss. Humans are not meant to live inside themselves. We are meant to move, to speak, to share, to laugh, to reach out. When someone engages with others even briefly, their posture naturally opens, their chest lifts, their breath deepens, their nervous system shifts from protection to participation. This physical openness creates the very signals bones rely on. I once worked with a woman in her 80s who lived alone for many years. Her posture had become increasingly rounded and her balance worsened. But she joined a small walking group. Nothing strenuous, just gentle strolls and conversation. Within months her posture improved, her step became steadier and her mood lifted. Her doctor was surprised, but I wasn't. Connection is medicine. It's remarkable how something as simple as conversation or companionship can support the body in ways we rarely think about. Greater than yes, connection reduces fear. Reduced fear increases movement. Movement stimulates bone remodeling. A shared meal, a phone call, a walk with a neighbor. These small interactions shift a person out of isolation and into relationship. And relationship in turn supports the body. When we feel seen, we lift ourselves differently. When we have purpose, we move more intentionally. When we are part of something larger than ourselves, the nervous system relaxes and the body begins healing. These aren't poetic ideas. They are physiological truths. Greater than this is such a beautiful reminder that bone health isn't just a physical journey. It's also a human one. Strength grows when we feel connected, supported, and encouraged. And I think for many people listening, this may be the piece they've been missing. Doctor, as we've explored movement, nutrition, sleep, breath, and connection, there's one theme that keeps resurfacing through everything you teach. Confidence. Not the loud outward kind, but the quiet inner confidence that tells a person, I can move. I can stand tall. I can trust my body again. For many seniors, confidence is the first thing lost after a fall, after a diagnosis, or simply after years of moving cautiously. Why is confidence so essential for bone health? Confidence, David, is the silent partner of every physical action. Bones respond to signals of strength, alignment, and purpose. When someone moves with confidence, even in very small ways, their body organizes itself differently. The spine lengthens, the chest opens, the breath deepens, the feet make clearer contact with the ground, the hips stabilize, the muscles fire in coordinated patterns. These qualities don't just improve balance, they directly stimulate bone remodeling. When confidence fades, the opposite occurs. Movements become hesitant, the posture collapses inward, breathing becomes shallow. The nervous system shifts into protection mode and the bones receive fewer building signals. Confidence is not simply a mindset. It is a physical state. And for people who feel they've lost that confidence, how do they begin to rebuild it? Greater than often the key is to start with something very small. Confidence grows from consistency, not intensity. A person can rebuild trust in their body by standing with a hand on a wall and feeling stable. Practicing a slow, steady breath, shifting weight gently between the feet, rising from a chair with intention, walking a few steps with awareness instead of rushing. These tiny moments signal to the nervous system, yes, we can do this. And each time the body succeeds, even in a subtle movement, the message gets stronger. There is a patient I remember well, a man in his early 70s. He had fallen once and avoided walking without assistance for months after. His world became small, only the living room, the kitchen, and the bedroom. His bones weakened because his movement and confidence shrank together. We began with the simplest possible practice, placing his hands on the counter and lifting 1/4 of an inch off the floor. Not a full balance exercise, just enough to feel his weight shift. Within weeks, he felt steadier. Within months, he started walking his street again. His confidence returned before his strength did. And then his strength followed. Confidence is a medicine the body recognizes instantly. Greater than and it's a medicine available to everyone, no matter their age, no matter their starting point. Hearing this, doctor, I think many of our listeners will realize that bone healing isn't just mechanical. It's deeply emotional and psychological as well. When confidence returns, the body follows. Doctor, as we move through this conversation, I'm noticing something profound in everything you're sharing. You're not treating bones as isolated parts of the body. You're treating them as reflections of an entire lifetime of habits, emotions, movement, and connection. And I think many people listening may be realizing maybe for the first time that aging doesn't have to feel like a slow decline. It can feel like a return to awareness, to steadiness, to purpose. Can you help our audience see aging through this new lens you teach so well? Aging not as loss, but as a shift in how the body responds and what it needs. Greater than I would be glad to, David. Bones are not just structural supports. They are a living record, a physical diary of how a person lives. Every movement, every breath, every pattern of posture, every moment of stress or release, every meal, every night of sleep, all of it leaves subtle marks on the bones. In youth, bones respond quickly and often without our awareness. But as we age, bones become more reflective. They respond to clarity, consistency, and emotional steadiness. This is not a decline. It is simply a different phase of adaptation. Aging is the process by which the body asks us to move with more awareness, nourish ourselves with more intention, and live with more balance between effort and ease. Bones at 60, 70, 80, or beyond are not fragile because they are old. They are fragile because they have been shaped by years of patterns that no longer serve us. The moment those patterns begin to shift, bones begin to change. I have seen people in their 80s gain strength they believed was lost forever. I have seen posture transform, balance return, fear dissolve, and movement become joyful again. Aging can become an opportunity, a turning inward, a listening, a refining of the relationship between the mind and the body. The bones are not simply aging. They are waiting for alignment, waiting for gentleness, waiting for confidence, waiting for clarity. When these arrive, even in small amounts, bones respond. Greater than that's such a beautiful reframe. Doctor, you're saying aging isn't about deterioration. It's about refinement. And the bones are partners in that process, not obstacles. Greater than exactly. Aging invites us to stop moving thoughtlessly and to start moving consciously. It invites us to let go of hurried, imbalanced, shallow movements and replace them with movements that are meaningful and precise. When seniors begin to inhabit their bodies fully, even if they move more slowly, the bones flourish. This is why I tell every patient, you are not running out of time. You are entering the phase where your body listens most closely. And when we meet the body with awareness, patience, and presence, the bones respond with strength. Greater than that perspective alone could change someone's entire experience of growing older. Instead of seeing their bones as something that's failing them, they can begin to see them as something communicating with them, something that can still change, adapt, and grow stronger. Doctor, we've explored so many angles today. Movement, breath, posture, nutrition, emotional patterns, confidence, connection. For many of our listeners, this may be the first time they've heard bone health described as a whole body, whole life experience rather than a medical condition. I'd like to bring everything together now for someone listening who may feel overwhelmed or unsure where to begin. How do all these pieces fit into a simple livable approach? Greater than that's a wonderful question, David. And the truth is, even though we've talked about many elements, they all lead to one simple principle. Bones become stronger when the body feels supported physically, emotionally, and energetically. Let me explain how the pieces connect. When someone stands with awareness, even for a moment, the spine lengthens. When the spine lengthens, the ribs move more freely. When the ribs move, breathing deepens. When breathing deepens, the nervous system calms. When the nervous system calms, muscles engage more efficiently. When muscles engage efficiently, bones receive clearer, more consistent signals. This chain reaction begins with something as subtle as posture or breath. Nutrition fits into the same web. When the body receives adequate protein, minerals, and vitamins, especially D, K2, and magnesium, it has the raw materials to rebuild bone. But it also has the resources to support muscle function, hormone balance, and sleep quality, all of which shape bone health indirectly. Sleep is another cornerstone. During deep sleep, the body performs repairs it cannot accomplish during waking hours. Without restorative sleep, bone remodeling slows, even if nutrition and movement are optimal. Connection with others reduces cortisol, and lower cortisol allows better calcium balance, deeper breathing, and more stable postural control. Confidence amplifies all of this. A confident step activates the hips. An upright torso awakens the spine. A deep breath energizes the ribs. Every confident movement becomes a bone-building signal. This is why the approach must be gentle but consistent. Not a dramatic overhaul but small choices repeated throughout the day. A few examples. Standing tall while washing dishes. Breathing deeply before rising from a chair. Hinging at the hips instead of rounding the back. Taking a short walk with deliberate steps. Adding a serving of protein at breakfast. Drinking water upon waking. Speaking with a friend before isolating. Stretching the ribs while in line at the store. Resting without collapsing. Noticing when fear tightens the body, and softening instead of shrinking. These are not exercises. They are habits. And habits shape bones more profoundly than any single workout. One of my patients once told me, "I didn't realize my bones were listening to my life." And she was right. They listen to everything. Bones are shaped by the sum of our choices, not the intensity of our efforts. Greater than doctor, what you're describing makes the whole journey feel achievable. People don't need to change who they are. They just need to shift how they live moment by moment. Greater than precisely. When people focus on small sustainable changes, the body begins to trust again. And when the body trusts, it heals. Even 5 minutes of awareness can redirect years of unconscious habits. Bones respond to clarity and presence more reliably than to force or intensity. Greater than this brings everything into such a clear, encouraging picture. Anyone listening, no matter their age, their condition or their starting point, can begin this journey today with a single small shift. Doctor, something our listeners often ask is, how do I know if this is working? Because when people think of improving bone health, they imagine a DEXA scan or a medical test, something measurable. But you've told me many times that the early signs of progress are not medical. They're experiential. Can you help our audience understand the subtle everyday changes that show bones are beginning to strengthen again? Greater than gladly, David. And I want everyone listening to hear this clearly. Bones strengthen quietly. They whisper before they shout. A DEXA scan is a wonderful tool, but it often takes many months, even a year, to reflect physical changes. The body, however, gives signs long before that. One of the first signs is improved balance. You may suddenly notice you can stand on one foot for a second longer or turn without feeling unstable. This is not just muscle improvement. It is a sign that your bone stabilizing systems are reawakening. Another early indicator is deeper, more natural breathing. When the rib cage begins to expand more freely, it means the spine and surrounding muscles are reorganizing. This expansion creates subtle, healthy mechanical forces that support bone remodeling. A third sign is less morning stiffness. When bones and joints begin functioning more harmoniously, the body wakes with greater ease. This is often the very first improvement people notice before strength, before posture, before anything else. Another powerful sign is a change in posture that feels effortless. Not forcing the shoulders back, but feeling the body rise on its own as if the spine remembers how to be tall. Then there is a return of confidence. You begin to walk across a room without fear or hesitation. You feel steadier stepping off a curb. You trust your body again. This confidence is not psychological alone. It is physical evidence that your bones and deep muscles are working together again. Some people notice they sleep more deeply or wake up less tense. This is because the nervous system is calming and that calm directly supports bone restoration. Others find that simple movements, lifting groceries, standing from a chair, reaching overhead, feel smoother, more coordinated. These improvements often happen quietly, subtle shifts that accumulate into something profound. Greater than that is incredibly reassuring. It tells people there are signs of progress long before the scans confirm it. Signs they can actually feel in daily life. Yes, and these signs matter. They are the body's way of saying, keep going. What you're doing is working. Too many people give up because they expect dramatic changes overnight. But the body is wise. It rebuilds slowly but consistently. And if someone becomes attentive, if they notice the subtle improvements, the process becomes motivating, even enjoyable. I once worked with a woman in her late 70s who felt discouraged because her DEXA scan had not changed after 6 months, but she was standing taller, breathing more deeply, and walking more steadily. I told her, "Your bones have changed. The scan just hasn't caught up yet." Her next scan a year later showed measurable improvement. Confidence, posture, balance, breath. These are not side effects. They are the early stages of bone restoration. Greater than that's such an important message for our listeners. Progress isn't just a number on a report. It's the way your body feels, the way you move, the way you carry yourself. And when those subtle shifts begin, they're telling you something powerful. Your bones are listening, and they're beginning to respond. Doctor, as we bring all of this together, I know many listeners want something they can take with them. Not a strict routine, but a way of living that naturally supports stronger bones over time. You've always said bone health doesn't come from one dramatic change, but from weaving small, supportive actions into daily life. Could you share what a bone day might look like in a simple, realistic way? Greater than of course, David, and you're right. The goal is not to create a rigid schedule, but to allow healthier patterns to become part of the day's natural rhythm. Let's imagine a gentle framework. In the morning, begin with awareness rather than speed. Sit at the edge of the bed. Place your feet on the floor and let the spine rise. Just a few slow breaths to invite the body into alignment. Standing with intention rather than momentum supports both balance and bone signaling. After waking, hydration is essential. A glass of water helps lubricate the spine, awaken circulation, and prepare the muscles for movement. This is a small but powerful way to set the tone for the day. Breakfast is an opportunity to support the bones from within. A source of protein, a source of healthy fat, and a source of minerals. Even something simple like yogurt with seeds or eggs with vegetables provides the raw materials bones rely on. As you move through the morning, the goal is not exercise, but presence. Stand tall while preparing food. Lift the chest slightly when walking. Shift the weight evenly between the feet when waiting in line. These are micro signals that accumulate throughout the day. In the afternoon, include gentle, meaningful movement. A short walk with deliberate steps, a moment of balance practice with a hand resting lightly on a wall, a few hip hinges done with alignment and breath. These movements ask very little of the body, but they give the bones exactly what they need. Nutrition continues with intention. Protein earlier in the day supports muscle maintenance, which in turn stabilizes the skeleton. Foods rich in magnesium, potassium, and vitamin K2 help reinforce bone metabolism. By evening, the focus shifts toward restoration. Stretching the rib cage gently, practicing slow breathing, or simply sitting with the spine supported allows the nervous system to settle. And when the nervous system is calm, bone remodeling becomes more efficient. Sleep is the final cornerstone. A consistent bedtime, a supportive pillow, and a posture that allows the spine to remain long. These choices influence how well the body restores itself during the night. None of these actions are dramatic. None require great strength or discipline. But together they create an environment in which the bones can listen, adapt, and rebuild. Greater than doctor, what stands out in everything you're saying is that bone health isn't a task. It's a lifestyle, not something we do for an hour, but something we cultivate gently throughout the day. Greater than exactly. The body prefers rhythm over intensity. When people try to fix everything at once, they become overwhelmed. But when they make small, meaningful choices repeated daily, the bones respond with surprising consistency. A bone-strong day is simply a day lived with awareness. How you breathe, how you stand, how you nourish yourself, how you rest, how you connect with others. These choices accumulate like drops of water shaping stone, quietly, steadily, effectively. Greater than doctor, as we come to the end of today's conversation, I'm struck by how hopeful this message truly is. So many people believe bone loss is a one-way road, something that only gets worse with time. But what you've shared today shows a completely different reality. Through awareness, small movements, good nourishment, deeper breathing, emotional release, and a bit of confidence, the body can still change. The bones can still adapt. Strength can return even in the later decades of life. Is there one final thought you'd like to leave with our listeners? Greater than yes, David. I want everyone listening to remember this. Your bones are not your past. They are your potential. They do not ask for perfection or intensity or youth. They ask for presence. They ask for gentle signals repeated with care. They respond to the way you carry yourself, the way you breathe, the way you live. Even the smallest shift, a longer spine, a steadier breath, a moment of confidence sends a message through your entire body. Healing is not sudden, but it is possible. And it begins the moment you choose to meet your body with awareness rather than fear. Greater than thank you, doctor. Truly, your wisdom gives people not just information, but a sense of direction, a way forward that feels human, achievable, and deeply compassionate. And to everyone listening, thank you for spending this time with us. If this conversation brought you clarity or comfort, know that you're not alone on this journey. Your body is capable of more than you realize. Your bones are listening, and small steps taken consistently can change everything. We'll see you in the next episode. Take care of yourselves and keep standing tall.